Ready? No, Katie's just going to come up. All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Let the roll show that all board members are present. Wow. Test. And if you would, please join me, bow your heads for a quick moment of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to gather tonight. Thank you for each of these citizens coming to support our district and support our efforts, Lord. I pray for your wisdom, blessings, and guidance through all our endeavors, and that you would just fill us with your will. In Christ's name, amen. All right. Well, we get to start tonight with some recognitions, which is awesome. And I will open it up to Mr. Chad Collins.
I'm done.
Just in time.
Good evening, everybody. This is such a wonderful evening to have a chance to celebrate some individuals and then also hire a new superintendent. So tonight is going to be a really special night for Lovejoy ISD. And again, I'm Chad Collins. And on behalf of the board, the first person that we want to recognize tonight is Al Litchenberg, who Al, would you stand for a moment? Or you come stand by me, if you don't mind. So for those of you who may not know or haven't paid attention, I know I've paid attention because I've got to spend the last 9 years serving as a trustee with Al Litchenberg. And it's been a phenomenal opportunity to watch somebody up close who truly, truly loves this district. And as a trustee over those 9 years, I can't tell you the thousands of hours, couldn't quantify exactly. I tried to do that, Al. How many meetings we've been in, trainings we've been in, team of 8 workshops to board meetings, and to quantify also how many maybe anniversaries you've missed, birthdays of your children that you potentially missed, or maybe their activities that you missed on behalf of all the students and all the community of Lovejoy is just, it's immeasurable. Your dedication to this district from the first day that I remember you being sworn in. I had been on the board for about 3 years or so when you were sworn in. And I remember from day one, you were contributing at the highest level, asking really tough, difficult questions, trying to look at every decision through every lens, from the smallest of our students, through teachers, through the administrators, through our community, through our parents. And you did it with such professionalism and vigor on behalf of all those lenses. You started that day one, and a month or so ago, you sat right down there by me, or down here, I think on this other opposite side. But 9 years later, to the very last day, you were doing it with the same vigor. And to pour yourself into the district is, and I got to watch it up close. What some people may not know, Al has worked in an organization where he leads the business development of one of the largest organizations in the country. He represents billions of dollars in P&L in the development of an organization. And so his time is really, really valuable, right? And for Lovejoy to have that business expertise on our board, and your ability to peel the onions on so many topics, whether it's been budget or philosophy around curriculum, to you name it, to do it while you have that level of responsibility on your shoulders as an executive at a really large company, Pizza Hut, go ahead and say, and Yum Brands, to do that consistently and to pour yourself into the district, I think our district owes you a deep gratitude for all of your work. And I know as new trustees, if you want to look at the model of being a trustee at Lovejoy ISD, look no further than Al Litchenberg. He is truly the model. Every kid in this district was as important to him as his own. And so I want to thank you, Kelly, and your family for allowing us to share him over these 9 years, because I know that's not easy and it's not tough. It's tough to maybe miss out on some of those special moments of your own family, to do that for Lovejoy. And so, Al, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, on behalf of the community, I wanted to tell you thank you. We want to tell you thank you for everything you've done for Lovejoy ISD. You've been a huge part of it. And as just a small token, we've all signed this, but this is the red schoolhouse. And hopefully this can hang somewhere on your home or lake house or wherever you would like it to hang. But hopefully you realize that this building may have started in 1917, but it was stronger and better and put in a great place for the great future of Lovejoy ISD because of your efforts. So on behalf of the board, thank you very, very much.
All right, thank you, Chad. And with that, these recognitions tonight are so special. We have another very special recognition to give tonight without question. So Dr. Womack, thank you for coming up.
Absolutely. So my name is Dennis Womack, and I'm the interim superintendent for about 5 or 10 more minutes. And I get the distinct pleasure, which we've already done this with all of our staff, so tonight's more for the community, to talk about Mr. James Puckett. For those of you that don't know him, that's Jim Bob. And Jim Bob has 16 years with Lovejoy and 42 years in public education. Wow. Jim Bob, we go back a long ways, and you've always been a blessing to work with and be a part of. And I feel like we're almost brothers a lot of times, but you're much older than me. Much. Right, Sally? And it's really nice that you ended your career as a public educator in Lovejoy, because you are the architect of Lovejoy's athletic program. You started it, you built it, and then you've been like stoking it all along for the last 16 years. And what a legacy you're leaving behind. Hopefully we can honor you and continue the great things that you've always done. And speaking of great things you've always done, let me tell you about this one time. Miss Stacy Dillon is in the black way over here on the side. Miss Dillon was asked by one of our directors in curriculum, Mary Mullins. She's back in the back waving. Mary asked Stacy, hey, my daughter's birthday's coming up. Do you mind making your famous cheesecake pie? It's a pie and it has whipped topping all over it, and it's in it has a little lid that goes over the top of it, one of those kind of pies. And so Stacy slaved over to get this pie ready for Mary's daughter's birthday. And she brought it up here to the office in the morning when she came to work, and she put it in our staff refrigerator in the red building. Well, then here comes Jim Bob. And Jim Bob, bless his heart, Miss Stacy went home at lunchtime. She went home to get some fresh strawberries to top the pie before she gave it to Mary to take home that afternoon. Well, in the meantime, while she's gone to get the fresh strawberries, Jim Bob came to the refrigerator and said, that whatever it is looks good. He thought he was having some banana pudding because we had a luncheon the day before and there was some leftover banana pudding supposedly in that refrigerator. So Jim Bob takes a big old spoon and gets a big old scoop, not only for himself, but for his secretary too, because that's his kind heart, always looking out for somebody else. Takes 2 big old scoops. None during this time did he notice there wasn't a single banana in that scoop, but he took a big old scoop. He then ate it and still didn't realize he wasn't having banana pudding, at least not that he was willing to admit. A little bit later, probably the next day, I believe, Stacy was revealing this story about, hey, I made this pie for Mary's daughter's birthday. I went back, got the fresh strawberries, came back to put them on there. And when I got here, there was this huge piece of it missing, scooped out. And they put the lid back on and sealed it really nice. And she said she was talking to her mother, and her mother goes, well, you know, there had to be a lady. If they could put the lid back on real nice, that couldn't have been a man up there. It had to be a woman. So then to come find out, Jim Bob was in the room when she was relaying the story. And she goes, who does that? Who takes these big scoops out of somebody's pie? I mean, it was nothing wrong with this pie other than it didn't have the strawberries on it. And Jim Bob goes, and she said, what? And Jim Bob goes, I thought it was nanner pudding. You know, Jim Bob also, Sally, you nicknamed him, right? Many things. It depends on what occasion. He told me about the Christmas story of the kids getting a picture. Actually, it was just Blair, right? Brooke going to get a picture taken with Santa Claus, and he decided to take the easy route. He decided instead of going to where he was directed by the boss to go, he went to another place because the line was going to be shorter there. And sure enough, it was. But when he got there, the Santa Claus wasn't quite as believable as the place that he was being sent to by Sally. So when he got home with the photos and Sally took a look at those photos, she goes, I don't care what you got planned tomorrow. You are getting up and taking her back to where I told you to get this picture taken. And you know what? He complied. That's why they're still married today. Jim Bob, I'm having fun at your expense, and it's great. Thank you so much for all the work that you've put into Lovejoy. We've definitely benefited, very similar to the words that Chad shared about Al. You may not have been here in 1917. Well, maybe you were. I don't know. You may not have been here in 1917 when they started Lovejoy and built the red, used to be white schoolhouse back then. But you've definitely left your mark on this district and on this community. I know you're not going very far. Heck, your whole family's here, literally and figuratively, in the community. But thank you for your 42 years of service in public education and your 16 years for Lovejoy ISD. Yep, let's get this. Just for Jim Bob.
I told Jim Bob when his family leaves that we lose half our audience.
Thank you for coming.
All right. All right, we're super excited to visit about our amazing education foundation. I'd like to ask Ms. Sarah Brown to come up and speak for just a minute. She is the executive director of the Foundation for Lovejoy Schools.
Hi, thank you all for letting us come speak to you this evening. Because of the generosity of the foundation or the community of Lovejoy, we were able to raise a little more than $625,000 this year to enhance the education here in Lovejoy. And tonight I'd like to introduce three people that are going to come up and present how we raised that money and what it's going to be used for. First, we have Mark Wheelis, who is our current president of the foundation. Larry Konechny, who is our incoming president. And Casey Jones, who is our treasurer for next year and our Denim and Diamonds chairperson.
Thanks to all of our generous community, we're able to raise $412,262 for teacher grants. These are the classroom enhancements that the state funding doesn't let us do. So it's pretty neat watching all the teachers when we're able to walk around and give these grants to them. It's amazing whether it's $500 or $20,000. Each one of them, they're just excited and how much they give back to our kids. So I just want to thank everyone in here for giving back as well. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Larry Konechny. I'm the incoming president of the foundation, and the check I want to present is for something that's been awesome, but wasn't typically something that the foundation funded, but was very important and wasn't covered in the budget. And so between Denim and Diamonds, which is our annual fundraiser, and then between the Lovejoy Scholars Program, we were able to raise $149,389 for the Safety Marshal program so that they will be back for the next school year.
Hi, I'm Casey Jones, and I'll be the treasurer for the foundation next year, and also, once again, the chairperson for Denim and Diamonds, which you'll hear a lot about. Exciting news on that. Tonight, I have the honor of presenting the check for the funds that were donated through the One Heart, One Lovejoy Fund in the amount of $64,936.
You really can't say enough about what our Education Foundation does for the district and the hours that these volunteers put in to accomplish these goals. It really makes a huge difference. It's a huge connection point for our district, and it is just a testament to the heart that goes into keeping our district great. So we're very, very, very thankful. So next on our agenda tonight is our public comments related to non-agenda items. And I'd like to go ahead and open up that time. Do we have any public comments tonight?
Public comment related to non-agenda items.
So before we begin, just a reminder, hold it to 3 minutes for us. Please respect our rules and our time. If there's any disruptions or anything, we'll give you a warning. If it persists, we'll escort you out, but don't expect any of that. And so please just abide by our rules on that. And with that, we'd love to have that person come up.
Mark Brugge.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to first say, like I said last time I spoke, that I'm a big fan of Lovejoy, anybody who's known me for the last 20 years, I can't say enough about it, and I will continue to say that. And first and foremost, I appreciate the fact that you guys started this out by a prayer. I mean, that just speaks to it, how I feel, and that's all I need to say in that regard. The reason why I'm here today is I believe everyone who's here today is acting in good faith and is looking out for everybody's interest. But I don't know that you're aware of something that's occurring that I wasn't even aware of up until recently, but needs to be brought to your attention. That there's bullying happening, but not in the way that you would typically think. That when parents are coming up here and they're speaking their mind, and they're speaking against the dogma or whatever it is, whatever the subject matter is, they're getting bullied. But it's not even bullying from a perspective that we may even expect it from. At least I was surprised the first time I heard it. And I've heard a handful of stories now, some firsthand, of parents who are getting messages that their kids are going to not get certain benefits if they continue to speak out. And they're hearing it from staff members. And this is very concerning to me. This is a problem throughout the whole United States where we're having this cancel culture where it's not allowing people to speak out, even if it's against the dogma. I mean, that's what makes America great is our Second Amendment, our ability to free speech. And you should never squash that. And I don't think anybody here that I'm looking at today, I don't believe anybody here would do that. But I'm hearing that it's happening. And somebody needs to put you on notice. They're even afraid to come tell you this. Now, fortunately, all my kids are at school, but I don't think it'd matter anyway. Anybody knows me, I'm going to speak my mind, and I don't make my decisions based upon fear. But it's very disturbing to me. It's very upsetting to me because I hate bullies. And people should have the ability to speak their mind. And if you don't have a policy about this, you need to get one because some attorney is going to hear about this, and there's going to be a lawsuit. This is happening, and I'm certain of it. I've heard too many firsthand accounts. So that's all really I want to share with you, and I want you to take what I'm saying seriously and to meet privately about it and to create procedures and policies to allow people to have a way to let you know where they're not being threatened. In other words, to speak their mind to people who have authority who can make a change, to support them. Even if they're telling you things that you don't like, you don't want to hear. Unfortunately, that's the tough job of being where you are or where anybody is in this. If you're in a leadership role, you have to take criticism from everybody, even if you believe they're wrong. And if anything in recent history, we're learning right now that there are a lot of things going on that are half-truths or not presented to the public in a way that is transparent. And I understand that you guys want to be transparent. And anyway, that's really all I have to say. I could elaborate more, but I only have 3 minutes, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Art, any other public comments on non-agenda items?
No, sir.
Okay. Our next item on the agenda tonight is public comments related to June 14th agenda items.
There are no public comments related to June 14th agenda items.
Great. Okay, no public comments. Okay. Our next topic tonight is one that we are super excited to talk about, and that is our new superintendent, Ms. Katie Cordell. And I'll just start off a little bit and talk about and give you a little bit of history on how we got here and what we've done. We started a process with a third-party consultant, JG Consulting, who does searches for superintendents. And we had 56 applicants apply. We utilized criteria established by the board and the community together to understand what our future superintendent would look like, what kind of values they would possess, how they would, what their background would be and their education level and their experiences would be. And through this process, we found a perfect candidate. We took those 56 applicants and we narrowed it down to 6 folks. These 56 applicants represented 6 different states, and we conducted interviews of those 6 people. And through that filtering process, we got to know each one of them at a certain level, and we went back a second time after some deliberation and some thought, and we interviewed 3, so we narrowed down to 3. We then conducted an interview with both the candidate and their spouse or significant other. And through that, we were able to unanimously select Ms. Cordell. The substance of those discussions was substantial. Through that process, you get a really good understanding after talking to them multiple times, seeing videos, looking at resumes, interviewing them a second time, deliberating on that, thinking about the words, thinking about the body language, thinking about all the intangibles that you attempt to read in the interview process, in addition to what's in writing and what you see on its face. And the values, the goals, the experiences, the vision, what it looks like in the future with Ms. Cordell, her family, all of those things were very clear to us that excellence was certainly the standard for Ms. Cordell and her family. And here in Lovejoy, we like to say one standard, and that's excellence. Her leadership abilities have continued to impress me. And from that point, we then named Ms. Cordell as lone finalist. And if you're not familiar with this process, a little different than the corporate world for me, you then would have a period of 21 days that you have to wait before you can bring the superintendent on board with us. And I always say you really don't know people until you work with them, until you get in the trenches with them, you roll up your sleeves, you start having tough conversations, you start putting actions behind those words and ideas, you start vetting out, you know, the values and all those things. You look at the toughness, you look at the resilience, you look at your ability to connect to folks, and you really see what does it look like beyond the words. And in those 21 days and our ability to bring her on as a consultant, that's been a very invaluable time for us because we have gotten to know Ms. Cordell. We've gotten to see her in action. We've got to have a lot of difficult conversations, and we've had some great conversations. And we've talked about your children and the future of Lovejoy. We've talked about our amazing staff. We've talked about this community. And we've talked about a vision forward that looks brighter than it does in the past. We've always operated with excellence here with great people, amazing people, great leaders in every regard. And we want to move the needle forward. And we're never satisfied. And we found that reflection of those values and those ideas in Ms. Cordell. And so I'm super excited to bring this item forward on the agenda and to be able to consider action to bring Ms. Cordell on as our superintendent. And I might just take a minute and open it up to anybody that might want to add or anything that I might have missed or give your perspective.
So I'll say, meeting Katie, just wow. Like when I first met you, I was so impressed. And I will kind of echo what Barrett said, getting to work with you the last 21 days in your consultant role has been fabulous as an officer. I take it pretty serious, y'all know, and getting in there with Katie, like I'm so excited. Like the best is definitely yet to come. She's going to do great things for us. And I'm just thrilled that you're here. So thanks for accepting the challenge, and it's going to be great.
So for you all to get to know her, she's going to roll that out here pretty quick, but you won't find somebody more genuine and authentic, kind, loving and compassionate for your children, yet strong and depth and smart. So I could not be more thrilled to welcome you and your family. We're so excited.
So I just wanted to say that we're super excited to bring you on board as a superintendent of Lovejoy. I know the last few months, the district's gone through some changes, and some of those changes have been difficult and hard. But I feel like you're the right person at the right time for Lovejoy to lead us forward. And I know the kids that are listening at home or the kids in the audience don't want to hear this, but I'm ready for the first day of school to be Monday. Because I'm real excited about our path forward, and I'm real excited about the future of Lovejoy.
As I gathered my thoughts tonight, I'm one of the new members of the board. I've not gone through this process before of hiring a superintendent, and it's been a great experience. Really enjoyed the challenges that have been presented by her to me in terms of thinking about what is the right person for superintendent. So I thought of some words that I thought about as I thought about her. And as prepared, she was very prepared for her interview process and for the in-person interviews. Perceptive. I've gathered that over the last 21 days, very perceptive. She can read the tea leaves very well. Thoughtfulness and straightforwardness, invested. She's got her kids here. She posted about having them at Puster. And so she's definitely going to be invested in our community. And I am so appreciative of a superintendent that's willing to go that extra step. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll add a couple of comments. A lot of the great comments have already been shared. But Katie, we're extremely excited to have you as a leader of this district. And I know as a board of trustees, it's important to collaborate. You're an unbelievable listener. I think it's one of the things you've done and demonstrated through your whole career is this continuous growth mindset. And I think you'll bring that to Lovejoy, right? And so I know our board really picked up on that and really values that as somebody who will engage with our community, work with us closely to deliver the best educational experience possible to kids, including yours. And so we're so excited to have those guys here with us starting here in a couple of months. So welcome.
And I'll just close with comments from this group in saying I would echo all the things everybody else has said, but I'll bring it back to where Barrett started, that it was a extremely thorough process, that we had a candidate pool that was impressive. And I think we're extremely confident that the best of the best is what rose to the top. So we're really excited to have you.
So if it's okay, I'd like to make the motion to approve Katie Cordell's contract to be the next superintendent of Lovejoy ISD.
Second.
It is okay.
Oh, is it okay for me to second?
It's okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations, Ms. Cordell. Congratulations, Jeff.
I want to thank the Board of Trustees for their faith in me and the incredible support that they have been providing throughout this transition. I also am filled with gratitude and appreciation for my sweet family, my husband Jeff, and my kids Jacob and Claire, who always provide just endless support. And I'd like to thank you, our staff and our community, in the 21-day waiting period. The way that I have been embraced and my family has been embraced really speaks to how special and unique Lovejoy ISD is. There is something absolutely special about this place that it is truly hard to define, but you feel it. I felt it throughout the interview process, and I have continued to feel it in every minute, every hour that I've had the opportunity to spend in this phenomenal place. I cannot wait for tomorrow, where I can be fully here, because I will tell you, my heart has already been here for some time. I know whenever I've been in a situation where I have a new leader, I want to know what they're about, right? What's their why? How are they going to go about their work? And what can we expect from them? And I want you to know that my why is all about our students. It all has to come back to that. I believe as a school system, we are holding hope in our hands, the hope of that individual student, their family, our community, our staff, and our schools. It's so important to me that we hold that hope with great care. You can also expect from me collaboration, ongoing learning for our continued improvement, and a deep focus on relationships and results. There is nothing that I can do individually to benefit this district, and I know that. It has to be us together doing this important work on behalf of our students, and I commit to that partnership with you. I am also very focused on making sure we have some priorities to move us forward. And that's really the what. Number one, I want to make sure that my leadership actions and behaviors continue to build on Lovejoy ISD's legacy of excellence. We have so many phenomenal traditions, and I want to make sure I honor our mission, our vision, and our core values. My second priority is to focus on making sure all of our students are future ready. We owe it to them to make sure upon graduation as a Leopard that they are prepared for what comes next. As a matter of fact, I can't wait for my two kids to walk across that stage. That's a professional and personal goal of mine, to have them graduate as Lovejoy Leopards. And lastly, we talked about some challenges a little bit earlier, and we do have some challenges in front of us. We've been through some challenges. I am ready to face those head on and make sure that we make the decisions that have to be made proactively and transparently to ensure we safeguard the future of our wonderful district. It's very important to me that we also leverage all of the incredible opportunities that we have out in front of us. I really believe our brightest days are ahead. I look forward to meeting you. I look forward to partnering with you. And I just can't be more excited about what's next. Thank you.
So before we move on to this next item, I just wanted to say thank you to our administration, to our teams, to our leaders, to our AD, to all of the leaders within our school district, our principals, our teachers, for continuing to drive excellence through change is opportunity. I'm a half glass full kind of person, and I believe that ultimately our culture that we all bring to the table for these kids is what drives us forward. And just wanted to say thank you to all of you for staying the course and doing the hard work. One thing I began to appreciate more than I ever did when I didn't sit in this seat is how tough you need to be in this business. And I'm not talking about these board seats. I'm talking about our educators, our administrators, our principals, our coaches, our superintendent. You got to be tough. And until you live that and walk it a mile, it's not as easy to appreciate. At least it wasn't for me. So I just wanted to recognize and say thank you for that. The next item on our agenda tonight is to conduct a public hearing to discuss our budget and tax rate for 2021 and 2022. And I want to ask Ms. Shay Adams to come up and present. The public hearing, we will begin with the questions or end with the questions?
Do we start with the tax rate if anybody has comments on that? Okay.
They'll just scale it in. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing for the budget and tax rate. So my first item would be the tax rate. If there are any public comments or questions about the tax rate, this would be the time. We still limit you to 3 minutes.
Budget or tax,
And the budget as well.
budget or tax rate.
Budget or tax rate. You can speak about that now if you have questions.
So, Mr. Owens, we have only had one person sign up for public comments for this portion, and that is Cynthia Bricky.
All right. Come on up, Cynthia.
Good evening. I think I'll talk to all of you. I wanted to basically say that in looking at the budget process and having gone through it with the council, it was always very difficult because the budget's presented to us by our administrative, staff, the ones that are on the front line, making those decisions about how we're going to spend money, what the salaries are going to be, et cetera. And it's really easy to kind of get glossed over, into this, maze of just all these decisions and thinking, well, it's worked in the past, so it should work this year. But what I've learned in the last several months is that what we're doing is not working. We're coming up short. And whenever I started looking at the money, the tax rate staying the same, and asking the board last month, why aren't we lowering the tax rate? It was because I was looking at the fact that the state of Texas is not sending us money for the COVID, for example. There's money there, but it's not coming to us. We are considered an entitled population who has plenty of money and plenty of amenities. And our needs are low on the totem pole when the legislators are trying to figure out what to do about the problems in Texas, dealing with immigration and educating a lot of children that are showing up across the border, right here in Dallas, Texas. And so we're going to have to fend for ourselves. And we do a pretty good job with the foundation, but we found that wasn't enough. We're $6 million short. We had to close this elementary school. And whenever I was looking at what we're going to do with this school, I really didn't have a very good picture of what we're going to do. What was our budget going to be? What was our timetable going to be? Actually, Marvin was the one that whenever he and Shay were trying to talk with me last month, he pointed out that the citizens can actually contribute to the maintenance and operation budget. And I didn't think you could even do that. We can't raise the tax rate. We're stuck, basically. We get a certain amount of money. Our population dropped. We closed the school because we have too many seats. And so now we're talking about starting a child development center. I know nothing about that. I know nothing about the capital improvements that are going to be needed. I don't know what we're going to do about this land we're talking about selling. We're adding athletic facilities, but whenever it was mentioned, do we have any future needs? Mr. Womack said, well, we'll probably need a bond election in the future, but it was very vague. And I think this board needs to get their arms really around the financial expectations that we have in the next 1 to 10 years and set expectations for us, because we need to know what we need to do to preserve this district. And I think your citizens will step up. We just don't know what you need from us.
Thank you, Cynthia. All right.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shay Adams. I'm the Chief Financial Officer. This is the 19th budget, I believe, that I'll be presenting to the Lovejoy ISD board. And there's a very prescribed process from Texas Education Code, from the Comptroller's Truth in Taxation that was mentioned earlier. And so we will step through that this evening. The main intent tonight is to summarize what's happened over the last several months, because the board has already taken most of the action in order to bring a balanced budget to the table, but we still need to review that. And so as we move forward, there were 5 major components of balancing the budget in the attack that the board chose. We talked about those over all these meetings and had town halls, had regular meetings, lots of budget workshops and so forth. And there's a myriad of information that has to be included in both the revenue estimate and in the expenditures. And so I'm going to review some of those with you tonight. We reviewed this during the last meeting, and our certified estimate of taxable value has increased, and our average home value has increased along with that. Now, typically you would adopt a budget once you had certified values, but those don't come out until July the 25th, and those will be used now by the Texas Education Agency under House Bill 3 to assign a tax rate to the district. So tonight you will hear all about our budget, and I'll give you the indicators that and the data that was used to develop our budget and the tax rates that we've published and the tax rates that we're estimating. But you won't adopt a tax rate tonight because they no longer allow you to do that until the TEA assigns it. But you have to go ahead and move forward with adopting a budget so that the district can operate beginning on July 1, because we can't spend a dollar that the school board doesn't authorize. And, you know, there's been comment throughout the spring and tonight about the responsibility of the board, and it truly is the board's responsibility to adopt a budget. And certainly we provide information on that, but that's one step that we can't make for you. We can administer it, but we can't adopt it. So we take our direction from the board on what priorities that you want us to include in those. But this screen is really important because it does have an impact on some of the other things that are happening within the district. And they're good positive things in that home values are increasing, but they make it difficult because we don't have elementary families moving in. And that has been a change in the demography over the historical, even last decade of the district. And so that is the reason for the inefficiency that was created by having 3 different elementaries. There was a time that the district was going to have a 4th elementary school, and it wasn't that long ago, but the trajectory changed on that as these housing values continue to increase and those average home values continue to increase. This is just a snapshot. Don't expect anyone to read that at all, but this is a snapshot of the May 27th publication that was in the Allen American. So you could have read it in your quarter page ad in the newspaper. It's required for us to publish. It is calculated once I send our data to the Collin County Tax Office. It is calculated at the tax office and vetted through them and then populated. And we are not able to modify this publication, and I have said for years, I, along with many, many colleagues across the state, Ms. Brugge would probably agree with me in some of the things you have to publish for the city, is that it's intended to be more transparent, but it actually is way more confusing to most people that don't have a long background in governance. Nonetheless, this summarizes for our taxpayers what the current year's tax rate is, which for us, there's 2 pieces of that tax rate for the school district. There's the maintenance and operation tax rate, also known as the general fund, and there is the INS tax rate, or interest in sinking tax rate, also known as debt service. And they're completely separate tax rates, but both are required to be adopted. And the maintenance and operation tax rate is what operates the day-to-day expenditures for the district. And it's spelled out in the Texas Education Code as to how we report those to the board and how we classify those. The board adopts them at that functional level. It's called a function, and we're going to go through each one of those and reported to the Texas Education Agency through the Public Education Information Management System, or it's called PIMS. And it's prescribed so that as those are reported to the TEA, that they can be comparable across the 1,100 districts, and so that everyone's reporting under the same guidelines for comparability as much as possible. So this publication was in the newspaper, and then along with it on our website, this publication was posted on the same day that compares where we were on the day that this was posted in the current year budget to where we are proposing for next year's budget, how much that is per student, and the variation and differences there. That's for both, again, the top portion, that longer portion is for the general fund or the maintenance and operation fund, and that is what you generally spend almost all of your time on. And then that lower portion is for debt service. The district has a multitude of other funds, including funds for those things that we were so generously announced earlier from the foundation, activity funds from the different campuses and activities such as athletic clubs and just general student clubs. We have federal funds. There's a lot of different funds, but the reason that the board doesn't adopt any of those is funds that we receive from those other areas are for designated purposes. So there's not a need for the board to adopt those. We're required for you to adopt both of these funds because they are tied to a tax rate, and they have very limited capacity on what your moves can be on those. They are voter approved. The debt service rate is voter approved before we can ever issue the debt that is being paid with that. And then the general fund has a cap on the compression rate that we can actually even set. And now again is set by TEA unless you go out for a tax rate, a voter approved tax election. Which is called a TRE, a tax ratification election. The only other fund that you adopt, and I'll recommend that tonight and you'll adopt it, is our student nutrition fund. And the reason for that is because we receive federal dollars that are used in that fund mixed in with also local dollars as well. The state funding template. So I'm going to shift now and talk specifically about the general fund, the maintenance and operation fund. They're the same thing, just with different names and references. I often tell people whenever I'm speaking to them about this particular fund is when you read in the newspaper or during legislation about the budget, this is the budget that they're talking about because it's what funds those day-to-day operations, pays our teachers primarily, pays payroll, we have electricity, supplies, and so forth. It really is what operates the school district. And by design, they have funded, through legislation, they have funded districts the amount that is necessary to operate for that school year. So it's really even set aside specifically for that school year. There are years that we have a surplus. There are many years that we have a deficit. But it is intended that the money generated from the revenue template, which is a culmination of all of the legislative intent and the education code requirements, all brought together in order for us to make an estimate of how much is going to be paid from your local funds and how much will be supplemented by the state. And so one of the most misunderstood pieces of this by the general public, and it's easy to understand why, is because if I pay a large high tax bill for my school district tax rate, that money is all going to stay in the district, including any excess over what my neighboring districts are going to pay. But that's not how the state funding works for public education. So there's a formula based on the number of students, and really what drives it most is the enrollment and the tax collections that we have. As long as we're setting the maximum tax rate that the state will allow us to set, the tax rate that we have really only identifies how much money that we raise here and we keep here versus how much the state's going to supplement. But there's a formula that brings those two things together. And it's all based on the number of students that we're serving, not only in whole and that are enrolled in the district, but how many are attending within the district. And so you hear us talk about attendance and attendance rates all the time. But in addition to that, we're expected to know, and we do these estimates at the beginning of the year, every year, and then we monitor them throughout the year. And you know that because you know what I've been reporting to you this year as we've monitored versus what we adopted last June. And I'll digress and talk about that a little bit later. But we need to know how many students we're going to have, what grade they're going to be in, what kind of special population that they may fall in, that they're not even tested for or identified yet. What part of the year are they going to come for? Is it going to be the full year? How much is the homework that they're going to live in? And many, many other things about that student. What is their income level going to be? Are we going to qualify for Title I? All those type of things matter in these data elements that we fill in, and that based on that output, and we use very educated information to put into that to project what our revenue is going to be to cover the expenditures that we're going to have. But it is based on projections. That frustrates a lot of people. It frustrates people whenever the estimate is not the actual at the end of it. And we have been very, very accurate for many years with our estimates. That's why we pay for a demographer. That's why they come in and study individually our district. But in the end, things like global pandemics happen, and sometimes the projection doesn't meet the actual, and so we have to react to that. And that's what happened in 2021. But as we talk about 21, 22, I want to talk specifically about some of the data elements and the estimates that are included there, because again, the board adopts the budget, and so it's important that you understand how much of that is included as projections. Forward a little bit. The revenue sources, and I've really already spoken to this, that we have within our $40 million budget that we are going to recommend tonight, $31 million of that is raised right here by our taxpayers, by people in the room who pay their taxes on their home values. And although their tax rate may not be higher than a neighbor's, their tax bill is higher than a neighbor's because they have a higher taxable value on their home. So they have an increased level of asset, but nonetheless, it brings more property taxes into the district. So from the state funding formulas, even though we're allowed to keep about $36 million, $37 million, 31 of it comes from right here. We are no longer paying excessive, what I would consider excessive. I really kind of consider it excessive any dollar that we have to send back to the state. But where we used to pay, like my first year in the district, we paid 55% of what we collected back to the state in recapture, Robin Hood, property wealth, whatever you may want to call it. As our student numbers have grown and as legislation has changed over the years, that has shifted. Before House Bill 3, we would have been set to pay about $2 million this coming year, and we're only going to pay about $300,000. So that's good news. So we get to keep more of our money here, but it just also decreases the amount of the state funding that we will receive. But the two largest pieces of funding that we receive by far are our local property taxes and our state funding formulas that come from the Texas Education Agency. The TRS on behalf is always a little confusing if you're not an accountant, but I feel like I have to include it because it's a substantial amount of money. It's $2.2 million. And what that TRS stands for, the Teacher Retirement System of Texas. It's the retirement program for educators that we don't even have a choice in. That's as a public educator, that is the retirement benefit that we have. And it's a very good one, and we're very thankful for it. It's in a defined benefit. But instead of us paying into the 6.2% that goes into Social Security, we don't pay that. And instead we pay about 7%. It goes into our retirement. When we retire and start drawing that benefit, as my husband did last year, and I'm very thankful for it, as we start drawing that benefit, the state's actuaries actually go in and estimate on prorated basis how much of that benefit goes back to the district that you worked for when you earned that retirement. And so we never collect cash for this, and we never pay out cash for this. This is all between the employee and the teacher retirement system, but we're required to record that per accounting standards. And so we have to record the revenue that we never receive, and we record the expenditure in the exact same amount that we never pay. But it's important that I point that out because it's a substantial amount. And then our local income for next year, we are estimating to be about $1.3 million. The majority of that comes through those items that are listed there. A combination of transportation fees, for instance, the donations that were presented earlier, the facility usage fees, which we had almost none of this year, but in years past we have had some, enough for us to definitely budget for it. For summer enrichment camps that we weren't able to hold last year that we are starting to hold again, and interest earnings, which are very, very minimal, but they also contribute to our local income. And so each of those are, as you can see, the total of all those in our budget is about $1.3 million. We did start a pre-K tuition program several years ago, and the estimate in 21-22 for the revenue side of that is $420,000. That would be for 3 classrooms. We currently, for the 2021 school year, we had 2 classrooms, and we had limited enrollment on those because of COVID related restrictions. And then we receive very little money in our federal revenue because of exactly what Ms. Brugge spoke about earlier. We are not considered in a high need area from a socioeconomic standpoint, which is really good news, but it does make it challenging for us because we still need to serve students in multiple ways. So the federal revenue that we receive here, the $350,000 estimate, comes from reimbursement from Medicaid eligible students who we also serve in the school district. And so Ms. Fuller and her staff do a phenomenal job of reporting that so that we can regain some of the expenditure that we spent on that. Does the board have any questions about revenue? Okay. So then I wanted to walk through the multi-layered approach that we had to close the $6 million or potential $6 million shortfall that we reported to you back at the end of the fall semester and that you've worked diligently on throughout the spring. And the first piece of that, and I've already spoken to that a little bit, you've spoken to it a great deal, and we've had lots of meetings on it. So again, this is just a general review of the big pieces of this and decisions that you've made over this time period, but really speaks to the enrollment decline that we are experiencing at our elementary grades. We're still growing at the secondary, and families with students in this, if you think about it logically, families that have students that are a little bit older are also more established in their careers and have more opportunity to buy homes in a larger, more inflated housing value. But students, they're not starter homes, and students that are in K through 4, we are declining in those areas. That was reported to us before the pandemic began. So it wasn't driven by the pandemic. That was reported to us by our demographer before the pandemic began. And we are seeing that by things like the graduation of 200 more students from our senior class and that great graduation ceremony that we celebrated, but that the kindergarten class for the same year was about 200 students less. And we're seeing that trend continue and forecast over the next several years. And on top of that, we did have enrollment decline from the pandemic itself. Not just us, the entire state of Texas had that. I don't talk to a single colleague. I'm actually right in the middle of the conference for CFOs right now. It started yesterday and it goes through Wednesday, and everyone is trying to figure out how they're going to deal with this gap. But most people are dealing with it with some funding that came from the federal government based on your Title I eligibility and a little thing called ESSER. That is not something that we're receiving. And so we had the opportunity to combine that with some of our other challenges and address that. Again, the demographic study had already indicated that. And then another piece that was really a large hit on us from legislation was that very, very late after the session, after the budget season last year started and was actually wrapping up, we found out that we were going to fall off of the fast growth list by about 8 districts. That was $1 million hit for us in 2021. We anticipated that 21-22, obviously if we're declining, we're not growing. So we anticipated that we would also lose that. So I do have little tiny tidbits of good news that you're not used to hearing from me. And that is that the final legislation that was adopted 3 weeks ago now, 2.5, 3 weeks ago, included a provision to hold harmless districts who had been on fast growth in 1920 that are no longer on fast growth. And so there's as with all of our state formulas, there's a complicated formula that goes through, but really cutting to the chase, we are set to receive about $250,000, between $250 and $280 for 21-22. No, I'm sorry. That was a Freudian wish. Listen, Mr. Wood, we are very excited right now about $250,000. In our eyes, that's 5 teacher salaries. And so we are really pleased that now the state formulas include us getting that. There is a lot to go between now and when we would receive it, but we have, we even have emails from Texas Education Agency with our estimates there. And so that is really good news.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? So the whole harmless will be for 21-22. Have they said anything after, or this is just a one-timer?
We right now are set, it is to be determined. Right now in the estimates that I've seen, we would get $11,000 in year 2. And that's because right now we're still declining. And one of the reasons that it hasn't all been released and set is because the state declined through the pandemic. And so now we have hold harmless numbers that were being funded on for 2021, but they're not our actual numbers. Thank goodness. And I'll share more about that with you later. So this right now, I would consider a 21-22 gift, and we'll have to see how it goes from there because our enrollment is actually growing due to our transfer program. So a little segue into that and how we got there. So in review, and you know this already, there was legislation introduced very early in Senate Bill 1, was it 3? Can't remember the number of it now, but the 1525 was the House bill. I can't remember the Senate bill's number. Both school finance bills by Larry Taylor and by Dan Huberty, both school finance bills included a repeal of districts' ability to charge tuition. As you know, our Lovejoy Scholars Program is one of the ways that the board chose to have local enhanced revenue by taking transfers for tuition. And we did that for many years, and we were able to continue programs for many years because of that decision. We have about 100, I'm just going to use 100, sometimes there's 110, sometimes there's 93, but we had about 100 students who paid either $11,000 to attend our secondaries or $9,000 to attend our elementaries. And we received the state funding for them and the average daily attendance as well as their tuition. And both of these bills were introduced at the beginning of the session to repeal our ability to do so. As they traveled throughout the session, the House bill was modified to continue to allow us to charge tuition, but we reported to you, as our responsibility is, we reported to you early the threat really that we would lose the ability to collect tuition for our transfers. And that's when we began talking to you about an alternative to that, given also our enrollment decline. As that ended up going through on the last day, the Senate did allow us to continue to charge tuition. So that is a piece that's out there. However, I want to remind you that the program that you created has yielded $2.4 million for the district versus the $1.1 million that we were collecting in tuition, because we still have the ability to collect for the average daily attendance of our students that were transferring for us. And so instead you set a limited number of transfers that we would receive in the district. And so you're still netting well over $1 million through the decision that you've made. So the legislation, as it ended up, they repealed the repeal is really what happened. They had initially repealed our ability to charge tuition, and on a trade at the end, they repealed the repeal in order for us to continue to have that option for now. Typically, when these things go through session, they're introduced 2 or 3 times and then they pass. And we've seen that repeatedly. And so that's just something that you might want to keep in mind. But obviously, our program is set for 21-22, and we are set to collect about $2.4 million in revenue. That, in addition to some of the 2021 information that I want to share with you, just reminding you that, you know, it's our responsibility to share that information as we get it with you. And you have the burden of making a decision based on that information in the time and timeliness that you receive it. It doesn't matter how unpopular the information is, whether it's, you know, well received or not, that has to be removed from it, and we have to share it with you. And so I hope that you felt the respect that we had, because we shared that information with you in order to try and build a program that protected the district. As we began this, and the reason really, I failed to say this at the beginning, the reason that I put these puzzle pieces together around that heart is that the board directed the administration that you wanted a balanced budget, but you wanted to protect that heart. Those programs are certainly subject to be delivered in different ways, and if we delivered them in varying ways that I'm sure you'll investigate in the future, this budget would be a lot easier to balance. But there have been yielded results and from those investments that the board valued, and we respected that. And so that's the reason I kind of have that in the middle and the puzzle pieces revolving around it. Those are board decisions, and I don't envy you for having to make them, because they're incredible programs from our incredible staff to our incredible students. So as we move through, did I skip one? We talked also about the inefficiency of our former elementary design. And that was, the inefficiency piece is literally just a business term. It had nothing to do with the heart that was poured out by the teachers to the students on this campus or at any other campus before you had to decide which direction that we would go. Geography played a large role in that. But it really came down to numbers, and those numbers were driven by that demography, and they were driven by those home values, and we've shared that a couple of different times. But redefining the way that you would structure the elementary programs saved the district about $1.2 million, and those students will still increase their leopard-like qualities. They'll just do so on a different building. So I know that that was a very difficult decision, and it was for not only the board, but for the community. And we look forward to really pouring into those 2 campuses and to this campus as it is transformed. The next piece was a reduction in the administration. That the board was super clear about that whenever we were looking at a budget that was almost $6 million in a shortfall, you really chose a path that was about half revenue and about half expenditure cuts. We started out trying to do that more in 2/3 cuts and 1/3 in revenue, but then our community also stepped up and started contributing to things that if we give you this revenue, then please don't cut this expenditure. And so as it ended up, we cut about $3.3 million, and then we have revenue increases here. But as you started that journey and you directed us to reduce the administration, that is a path that we set forth and saved about $850,000, so almost $1 million in savings by cutting those individual staff members. One thing that is, and I'll talk about this again whenever we get to the individual function, that is also very misunderstood is that people think if you work in the red building that you're in administration. And so that is just something that, we have to share and define for our community. And I'll talk more about that whenever we get to a functional level. And then, of course, our security program design, we are so excited to present to you a budget tonight that includes 5 of our marshals. And for the check, and thank you so much to our community and to the foundation for facilitating that from our community. We have had, at the time I did this slide, we had about 123,000, I think, and tonight you had it up to $149,000 that has been donated directly from our parents. Some of those parents were through that foundation avenue that they created for specifically our security marshals, for our school marshals, and then others are parents who used to pay tuition who also wanted to continue to pour into Lovejoy, and so they donated there. And so $149,000 now has been donated in that program. And so the budget you received tonight, the recommendation includes 5 marshals, and so there'll be a marshal on every one of our K-12 buildings. We did have some changes recommended for the transportation program, and so that the fee that you began charging to our regular education riders last year in 2021, that we really extended that fee to all riders. The district will still be supplementing the transportation program by about $400,000 if we receive all the fees that have been estimated, but we're estimating another $150,000 in collection on top of those that we collected in the 2021 school year. And so those were just kind of all that wrapped together. And I want to walk through, and I'll not belabor this, but I kind of have to balance between those that don't think we share enough information and those that think that we share too much information or take too much time. And I realize that you may get that glaze over that was referenced earlier. But this is the budget that the board has the responsibility to adopt. You really adopt one document, especially around the general fund. You adopt one document. And so we really pare it down and focus on that one document that you're charged by policy and by law to adopt for us to operate, instead of presenting to you at a hearing a full set of financials with balance sheets and cash flow and so forth. We will reference those, but I want to walk through and make sure that you understand what you're adopting in each one of these functions. And so function 11 is what we're all here for. We're all here to educate our students. Katie talked earlier about her focus and that really everything that we do culminates around those students. And function 11 is defined by the Texas Education Code through the financial accountability rating, financial accountability guide that really is our guidance as CFOs in public school districts, that reflects expenditures of direct interaction between students and teachers. And so, I disagree with a lot of things that they don't consider instructional, but it doesn't matter if I disagree with it. That's how I have to classify it, and that's my oath to do so. But $22,800,000 of the money that we are asking for you to approve tonight is reflected directly with that instruction. We are a human capital intensive business, since we should be, and this is reflected there. So of that 22 million, and we have a comparison there of where 2020 is, we break that down for you into individual pieces. And so there are 4 major categories in each of the functions. You don't adopt it in that manner. We have the ability to move it within those as needed, but there's not much need for movement and there's not much room for movement because about 87% of this budget is made up of payroll. But you adopt it at the functional level at the 22 million, and that's made up, as you can see there, of payroll, contracted services, supplies and materials, and then other. And payroll is inclusive of anything that's paid on a contract, an employment agreement, benefits related to that payroll, and taxes that our employer matches there. The contracted services nomenclature is sometimes confusing to others. It does include literal contracted services. So if we don't offer a service within the district because there's not enough to justify us having a full-time employee, then we literally contract with a company who does provide it for that little piece of an employer, an FTE that we need, and it's a much better deal for the district. But contracted services also include electricity. We contract with the utility company to pay electricity costs. And so that is sometimes a little more confusing, and we'll talk about electricity whenever we get to function 51. And then supplies and materials are pretty self-explanatory. They're tangible items, they're paper, they're books, they're supplies in the classrooms, their name cards for the kindergarten desk, and so forth. And then the other is really intangibles, if you'll kind of think of them in that way. So fees that we pay, travel when it's necessary, food when it's necessary, even though food itself is tangible, we don't keep that item, and so forth. And so I'm not going to go through those on each function, but those are the categories in which I've broken them down for you and compared it to the 2021 budget. And then that outer column is the 21-22 and how it's made up. I also included there a reduction, or in some functions it's a reduction, but the change from 2021, so that you can kind of see what's happened there as you have made the decisions that you've had to make over the last several months. And this is one of the very first ways that I disagree with the Financial Accountability Ratings Guide, is that they don't consider libraries as instructional. I can't imagine how you would consider them anything other than instructional, but they have them in a separate category called instructional resources. And this is where our librarian salaries, the actual library books, if we purchase those in the general fund, and so forth, are housed. And same breakdown here. As you can see on any of these slides, there'll be a large percentage of that function that is in the payroll category. Our instructional staff development in function 13, this is teaching the teachers. This is our professional development. This is our support to the teachers on how to teach in a digital world, or on how to teach a specific curriculum, and so forth. Any of the in-service are learning at Lovejoy or learning in Lovejoy as we have now. And so you can see the breakdown there. Oh, I failed to mention, let me back up a little bit. I knew I was getting a lot of information on these slides. At the very top, do I have a light on this? I don't know. I don't think I have a laser. Okay. So at the very top, right under instruction, you see the number of employees paid from this function. So 342 of our 600 employees are paid out of the instructional function. So each one of these, I also provided that number. And then for those of you that really love to go through and add up things, let me go ahead and tell you, when you add those numbers up, it's going to be larger than 600, which is the number of employees that we have. Why is that? Because some employees are represented in multiple functions. And I didn't try to break it down into a quarter of Dr. Womack is over transportation, and a quarter of him is over technology, and a quarter of him is over athletics, and another quarter. And so actually his would be about 7 or 8 quarters. But I didn't try to break them down in that way. So if a piece of any individual salary is in that function, it's represented in that number. And I failed to say that earlier. So as we float through here, you can see on the instructional development, there's 16 staff members that teach our teachers, that support our teachers, and that provides professional development. Instructional leadership is just a little bit different than that, in that they are directing and managing the staff of a specific instructional service. So for instance, Ms. Fuller's, her category is function 21 because she leads the special education staff. We have a leader in our career and technology education, in Mitzi Allen, who does a just phenomenal job in there as well. So the instructional leadership, we have 7 employees across the entire district that are represented there. And again, I won't read numbers to you. All of this will be included, I'm sure, in the board brief that goes out and will be available on our website. So feel free to take pictures, but don't feel that that's necessary. I forgot to hand out the budgets. Do you mind doing that? They're on the corner of my desk. The black and white. School administration, this is where our principal salaries are housed, assistant principal salaries, student records, and anyone supporting this campus principals, and any related expenditures that they have. And so this is a $2.4 million investment of 38 people across the district. And so you can tell we don't have 38 principals, but by the time we add our principals, our assistant principals, the receptionists at the front desk in the principal's office, bookkeepers for the principal, and so forth, then we have defined our PEMS clerks as well that keep student records are included here. Our guidance and counseling services are represented in function 31. That also includes diagnosticians. Basically, if you're testing students and through our psychological test and any other assessments that are testing related are represented in function 31. So we have 25 staff across the district who are represented there. Our health services are our nurses' salaries, our clinical supplies and screening costs. So anything related to the health costs for our students are represented in function 33. We have 8 across the district who have salaries that are classified in that way through the general fund. Again, this is general fund that we're looking at. Our transportation costs, $1.2 million for us to transport our students to and from school. So that includes our bus driver salaries, our repair and maintenance for our buses, and fuel costs. You know, back when we're trying to determine and really put on our crystal ball of how many students will we have by the end of the year, how many teachers will we need to teach them, how many of them will come to us with special needs, how many of them are going to come during the year instead of at the beginning of the year. We also need to have a really beat on how much is fuel going to cost, because it makes a big difference in our transportation costs and also in our electricity costs as well, because it drives that. But we have 33 people that are classified in our transportation. And then in our extracurricular activities, this one is often misunderstood because the extracurricular activities that we have primarily that are defined here are our athletic programs and our fine art programs. Only the portion of a salary that is specifically for that extracurricular piece of the activity is defined here, because those employees teach during the day. They're in the instructional costs. They're in function 11. But if they receive a stipend specifically to coach football or to teach orchestra, that portion of their salary is reflected here. But they teach during the day, and we break down their schedules and their calendars at the beginning of every year, and any of our principals can do it for you because they're masters at it. That we've had a really good time. We have a little PEMS party at the beginning of the year, and we go through every one of their schedules so that we can make sure we're appropriately allocating those, and we don't just take a whole big swipe at that. And so these are broken down specifically. We have 103 employees across the district who are in that classification. And then the general administration I was speaking to earlier, this function's literal name is general administration. However, most times people associate administration with those that are housed in the superintendent's office or in the red building for us, or wherever that location may be within a district. But there are very specific employees who are categorized in function 41. In this particular function, we have 16 employees that are classified as general administration. We have about 70 employees that have a desk in the red building or the wing right next to it. They are classified in wherever their function. What are they serving at? Are they a diagnostician that they just happen to serve the entire district? So they have district-wide services, but they're not administration. So that is why whenever a lot of people will look at that and say, well, you said you cut $850,000 in administration. We cut $850,000 in district-wide services of people who are housed in the administration building. And so I wanted to stop and make sure that I was really clear on that. So of the 16 people that were identified here, formally we had 19 people that were identified in this particular classification. We cut 16% of the people who sat in the administration building, most of which served district-wide purposes, but were not function 41 administrators. We've never had enough for us to cut 12 of those. And the facilities maintenance and operation, this is really where our costs are for keeping the grounds clean, paying the utility bills for our not only our grounds, but our building custodians and supplies. And so this cost is primarily driven by utility cost and the custodial and ground salaries. We have 46 of those across the district. And we made cuts in this area as well. And we've already talked about our awesome campus security marshals. We have 7 that were identified that has some piece of them identified in function 52. And I'll give you an example of that. We have 5 security marshal positions that are 100% coded here, but Dr. Womack supervises that program. So a fraction of his salary is also coded there. And then he has support that is also coded as a piece of that there. And so that kind of makes the point for me that I made earlier, that just because you see a number there doesn't mean we have FTEs of 100% in that particular function. Our data processing services are really those things that keep us running, our network salaries, our computer systems and management and web design. If we have an expenditure that is directly related to instruction, a piece of software, for instance, that's directly related to instruction, it will be charged to instruction. But there's a framework of services, and you can tell how old the FAR guide is that we go by because they call it data processing services. And I don't hear many things called data processing anymore, even though that's what we do. So we have 11 staff members that are included there, but we also, as you can see on the supplies and materials, that large percentage of this cost that is for actual hardware or software services. The only reason that we have expenditures here in the community services side of things is because we provide that pre-K program for tuition. And so that doesn't fall into, even though they're pre-K teachers and they are instructing by our statute, we can't charge them to the instructional category because that is something we're taking tuition and providing a service for that is separate and apart from our K-12 program. And so we provide that for our community, and therefore our community services is where that is classified. When we do summer camps, that is the same for that. And our after-school program is included there as well. The contracted instructional services between public schools, that basically means that we contract with TEA so that we can send them $331,000 because we have no choice in doing so. So it's not as if we set out to do a contract, but you do have to approve one, and you'll recall that you approve a recapture contract every year, but it's required that we do so as a property wealthy district. So we estimate that we will send $331,000 back to the state. This year, we have about $197,000. I ask you tonight to approve in the consent agenda that's coming up an increase to that because we ended up with a higher collection on our taxes than what we had originally estimated, even though we ended up with a much lower student count. So those two things in combination mean that we're more property wealthy and that we may have to pay a higher amount for that. Our shared service arrangements are where we pay a small fee to participate in, and so it's for a very specified population of students where we can't provide staff that would fully embrace and serve those students. And this is an example that we used to be in a shared service arrangement specifically for special education before we had our own special education director. And so our students were one of many school districts that were in that co-op, and we prorated our share of that. We're no longer in that, of course, and outgrew that many years ago. It doesn't even exist anymore, but we're still in shared service arrangements for things like purchasing cooperatives or for staff development, some pieces that we contract through the service center for. So you can tell that's a small amount. And then because we have to have a placeholder for it, and thank goodness that we have not had to use this expenditure, but JJAEP stands for the Juvenile Justice Alternative Education Placement. And so we have a contract with them should we have a need to use that facility. And if we do, then they would charge us for that. But we have not had to pay that cost, but we need a placeholder in our budget for it. In the event that that were to happen again, we have to read that crystal ball and see if that's going to happen during the school year. And we certainly would hope that it would not, and it has not historically. And then the 99 function, we're finally at the end, y'all. There's not one above 99, is for the appraisal district fees that we pay. And those are also on a prorated basis across the entire Collin County. So they take what the total cost of running the appraisal district is, and then they prorate those across the districts based on their taxable value. Pieces of that. So that'll be about $315,000. And all of that culminates into the budget that I presented to you in paper, and I think we passed it out as well. And so the budget that you are responsible by statute and by law to adopt is in this format. Now, you may see them look a lot different on different districts. We can all put our school colors on them and so forth. But you adopt them at the functional level that allows the administration the flexibility to make changes as we need to within that function. So we can't move something without your approval. We can't move money, not a dollar of it, from instruction to administration, for instance. We can't move money from data processing to extracurricular activities. That is why we bring you amendments during the year. We do not move those other than that. But within the function, if we had estimated that we were going to contract for a specific service from another company, and then we ended up having enough students that we hired our own personnel, then we could move that internally. We could move the money that we had set aside to contract with someone to payroll so that we could contract with someone that was a better value for the district. Any questions about that? Because this is a really important document that we're going to ask you to adopt on a different agenda item. The calculation of our tax rate documents, this is new for 21-22. So in your budget packet board, you will see behind that about 8 pages of calculations that probably look foreign to you. Those are calculated by the Collin County Tax Office, who are certified to calculate those based on the appraisal district's values that are provided. And so you now have to attach that to your budget. I just wanted to share with you the tax code that came from, because I'm not sure that that's going to be very helpful information to you, but it's required. And so there you have it. Separate from the general fund, we also need you to adopt a tax rate for the interest and sinking fund, also known as debt service. And that literally pays only repayment of those bond funds that we have issued to build capital improvements, either buildings or purchase capital improvements that were approved by our voters. They approve you to do that when they pass a bond election, but you issue those as needed and as the tax value can accommodate it. And so it is 50 cents now, and we are recommending that it remain 50 cents. You won't adopt that tonight, but you will adopt the budget so that we can make our August payments on our debt service. You pay that twice a year. We pay it in August and we pay it again in February. Those actuarial build outs of each of our bond portfolio are staggered out between 5 years if we purchase a piece of technology, maybe 8 years if we purchased a bus, depending on what the asset is, then those are financed accordingly. And so the totals of all those that we would expect to pay $15 million. This is where we try to find places that we can refinance and refund bonds that were sold at higher rates of interest that we can find at lower rates of interest. And so you do that often throughout the portfolio management as well. Doug Witt was here with us a few months ago and shared that with you. And so you'll be adopting a budget that would look very simple, because there's revenue coming to one function. 71 is where we collect where we pay the debt service payments from, and then the revenue that comes into that, other than about $100,000 comes from local revenue. We do get a very small piece each year from the state that is called ASAHE, not to be confused with ASATAR, but it's additional state aid for the homestead exemption that they required us to make some adjustments on. And so they fund us, and it's about $100,000 out of that 15 million. It's really immaterial. And then again, you have to adopt the student nutrition budget. We shared with you the really great news on student nutrition next year for our K through 6th grade students. They will all have the opportunity to eat for free every day in the cafeteria. And so we have made some adjustments to the budget. I will really expect for you to see an amendment in this budget, because we're having to estimate with no historical data. We've never had all of our students eat. And just because we offer it, we don't expect all of our students to eat, but we have to staff and order food if they all decided to. And so thank goodness Matt McCarty is a really good budget manager, and he watches labor and food very closely and builds menus around that. But we have attempted to incorporate into the budget what we expect that to be based on some historical information that we have. But all K-6 students will have the opportunity to eat for free for the school year. And that is how the federal government has chosen through USDA to use some of the corona relief money. And we expect, even though we budgeted for a balanced budget, as you'll see on that one, the same as you saw on the debt service, we budgeted it to be balanced, but we really have a placeholder in here, and we expect to recover about $200,000 of the fund balance that will be completely depleted because of the lack of sales in the current year and the closures that we had. We pulled a great deal out of our fund balance for that particular fund last year, and this year we will pull the rest of it plus some out of the general fund. And so this should build about $200,000 back into the food service fund. That's the hope, at least, but that's based on our estimates of who will eat and who will not. And then I just wanted to update you and kind of end on a positive note, which I rarely get to share with you. We have the responsibility all the time to share with you what data we think is going to drive both your expenditures and the revenue. And that is exactly what I did back in the fall, whenever we did not know we were going to get hold harmless for the first semester or the second semester. With the information that we have now, it appears that we will qualify for both the first and second semester. And one of the benefits of that hold harmless is that we will be funded for closer to what we estimated for, rather than the 200 and some odd students that we didn't recover. So there's about a $1.8 million difference between what we would have been funded if it were on actual attendance versus what we will be funded because of hold harmless. The state has chosen to use part of their funds from the Corona Relief Fund from the Fed to fund that hold harmless for the school districts. The best part of that for us is, number one, that we will be funded at a hold harmless level. That doesn't mean we will be for next year. So we can't, just because our revenue looks at a brighter picture this year, that's going to help us to not take as much out of our fund balance as we originally reported, because now we're going to get revenue for that. Plus we pulled back that 15% from our non-personnel. But what's even better news is that one of the ways that the state's going to use some of the legislative pieces that were from the Corona Relief Fund is that they designated $208.35, I think it is, per student that you qualify for, and you take that number times your enrollment, and then whatever that number is, you subtract what you received in ESSER money. Well, if you subtract 0 from what that answer is, then it appears, but there is no release of confirmation, and I can't get confirmation from the grants department, but there is an expectation that based on our enrollment and what is available right now through the publications, that we would recover almost $900,000 in 21-22, that you could reimburse your fund balance, and again in 22-23. So about $1.8 million that you could reimburse your fund balance, because that will be a one-time infusion, just like it was a one-time pool. For districts who receive ESSER 2 funds, you have to first subtract what your ESSER 2 funds would be from that multiplication of the 208 times your enrollment. You subtract what you receive in ESSER 2 funds, for that, as that's 0, and then you subtract how much hold harmless it took for the state to make you whole. And so those numbers are extremely diminished, but most of those districts are receiving both ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funding that you're not receiving. So that really does not impact the 21-22 budget that I'm about to ask you to adopt, but I think it's important information for you to have. The 21-22 budget that I'm asking and presenting and recommending for you to approve is about $300,000 more than what we originally proposed. It includes the addition of 2 sections of teachers that because of our growth in those particular areas. It includes about a $43,000 increase in our premium for our insurance, and several other, now that we have individual employees rather than vacancies in those spots. We still have about 30, I think, vacancies. Is that right, Mr. Musers? I think 28 to 30 vacancies, and we estimate those to be at an average of a year 8 experience. But as we hire people, if they're a year 23, then that costs more. If they're a year 2, that costs less. If they take benefits, it costs more. If they don't take benefits, it costs less. So when you multiply that across the 600 employees that we have, then now we have really accurate data for you. We come back to you in September, typically after the September payroll. Actually, we bring it in October because our September payroll is September the 15th. And after we've had those PEAMS parties, that I call them endearingly, with our principals, and we've adjusted someone's salary into the appropriate function that we may have thought would be 100% function 11. And so that's how we budgeted it.
we're not increasing their pay at all, but now we find out that actually 2 periods that they have or 2/3 of their salary is related to another function. So we call them net zero amendments. And so we're just moving their function out of one into the other to really more clearly define. It's at a very granular level. And so we usually bring that to you in October as an amendment. But your budget includes all the things that we've discussed, including those just discussed. It will include also the compensation plan that's in your consent agenda as presented. It does not include an increase in pay right now for any of our staff. So everyone will be at the same salary that they were in the previous year. And other than that, are there any specific questions that you have? Mm-hmm. How did that work? Well, I still don't have final numbers for you, but where we had originally thought it would be a $3.1 million hit, I would estimate now that we would be south of $2 million. But a lot of that depends on how our other funds that we have to supplement. So for instance, whenever we get a final number on our student nutrition fund, once they're completely depleted, then the general fund has to transfer to cover that. And so kind of dependent on those numbers, I would think that we would probably be in the 1.8 to 2.1 or 2.2 million. One of the things that's in also your consent agenda is a final budget amendment. And one of the largest amendments, largest changes in that is because we are right now encumbering and authorizing repair of the Winter Storm Uri repairs. And so even though we'll get reimbursement from the insurance company, we have to pay it first, and you have to approve that expenditure, even though you'll also be approving the revenue side of that. And so there's about $500,000 even right now that we've already encumbered. That's function 51. Mm-hmm. So you'll see a large increase there. And it also increased the revenue to reflect that.
Shay, did you say 87% is your estimate on total payroll?
Mm-hmm.
How has that trended over the years?
How's it trended? Up. So there was a time period where we had about 80 to 81% in payroll. And as we have cut away and cut away and cut away through the years of ASETAR, through the years of trying to protect those programs and keep those, then we cut as far away from the classroom as we can. The classroom's primarily expenditure is the human capital in the classroom. So then that increases the people, the percentage of people there. And so we have really trimmed away any non-payroll related expenditure that we can and still deliver the programs that we have. We have been fortunate to have been a growing district, and that our voters have approved for us to use bond funds on some of the things that other districts have to use their general fund for. And so that also increases the amount that we spend on payroll, because we have been able to, like when we renovated our elementaries, that was through our bond program and not through our general fund. Dr. Womack, do you have anything to add?
Confirm the 2.1 hit to our reserves. That's prior to fund balances, prior to the ESSER 3 funding, which we are anticipating and estimating, but we still aren't. We have guidance, but we're not certain yet.
Right, and we don't expect that to actually come until the fall. We don't even have clarification yet on exactly how they'll distribute that. And we already know that we'll have strings on how we can spend it. We'll have to, they've allocated it based on 208 kids per,
right.
But we still have to do it. The school finance division at TEA isn't even administering it. The grants division is. So we'll have to apply for it and find out what strings are attached with that. So the 2.1 really, I wanted to share that news with you. It looks as if we'll get about 1.8 of that back, but we don't have enough guidance for that to be a part of a decision.
That's not a part of our budget. We're going to pass.
That is not a part of the budget that you're passing.
3.1, correct. Our budget will be at the 3.1 hit to fund balance. The amendment.
The 2021 budget allows a $3.1 million hit, but I do not anticipate you taking that.
Right.
Because of several of the other reasons that I've listed.
We're anticipating things happening
Right. I anticipate you'll probably hit at about $2 million. And hopefully then that's going to be closer to the number that you'll qualify to collect from the relief that was intended for that purpose.
Right.
But those are 2021 issues. And the relationship it has to you balancing the 21-22 budget is that percentage and that cash flow.
I think that's important just to remind the public of how much we have to do without really any concrete numbers.
Right.
We have to use a worst case scenario to make these decisions and to think forward about that. It's great to share the information that we have based on what guidance says, but it's certainly a political process that changes, which is why we have to disclaimer these statements so heavily. So.
ESSER 3 money would be divided over 2 years or spread out over 2 years?
It will be spread out over 2 years, but now I'm not really referring to that as ESSER 3 money. I just want to make sure that with both of y'all, that this is a separate caveat in how the state has defined how they will are really trying to address those districts who did not receive ESSER 2 or ESSER 3. So there is a calculation that includes ESSER 2 and 3. For most people, for us, that's 0. But yes, Mr.
ESSER
Wood.
1 was a lot.
ESSER 1 was last year, and they gave it to us and took it away at the same amount. They supplanted it, and that's what they're doing with a portion of the ESSER 2 money if you qualified for it. But your statement was correct in that the way that they have the little bit of information that we do have on it from the session is that the 208.35 would be per student. You would subtract from it your ESSER money, which for us is 0, which would leave us with about 900,000, and it is for 21-22 and again in 22-23.
So that $1.8 million deficit remaining on fund balance, it'll take 2 years to fully recoup that.
Right.
And those funds have to be spent a certain way, I know there's 3 very specific.
All we know at this
requirements.
point is that it's being administered by the grants division and that we will have to apply for our funds that were already set aside for us and that there will be strings, but we don't have any idea. The reply email that I got back from that division is that I'm inundated. I'll get to you when I can. So it was an automatic.
People, the grant organization we'd be applying from, is that state or federal?
No, it's the Texas Education
Okay, so
Agency.
that federal
They're
money's
just
already been
administering
transferred.
the money that has been filtered, right?
Might be a little easier.
Right.
The slide was quick on the plant maintenance and operations where we're about $1 million less for 21-22 versus 2021.
You're on
What's the
section
big-
51?
51.
Okay.
What was the big difference there? Or maybe I'm seeing something from 2021 that said $5 million in there. And your number there is a little bit different.
Are you looking at the final budget amendment?
Yeah.
So the final budget amendment includes that freeze money that we have to do the repair and maintenance.
Okay.
So this is the amount that we actually had budgeted this year before you approve that amendment tonight. And that's the one you're approving tonight is specifically around the insurance recovery that we'll have for the winter storm. The
Right.
reduction here is related to 15% cuts that we had across the district and with some personnel cuts that we have because we don't have as much, well, we still have plenty to clean, but we won't have as much personnel to do
So was
so.
a big part of that some of the cleaning things that were higher for last year than they were?
Yes, because we had an increase in the COVID-related expenditures. Those would have gone in function 51. And there's not a need to repeat some of those. Some of the supplies and materials that we purchased and some of the guards and so forth. And
that
some of
makes-
them were one-time expenditures.
I understand.
And it's really what it's intended, the reimbursement that we're getting, those are part of what is intended to reimburse us for. Anything else? Okay. That's all I have for you.
With that, I will close the public hearing. Next on the agenda is to consider the adoption of the 2021-2022 budget.
I'll move that we adopt the 2021-22 budget as presented.
Motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Jason James, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Next on our agenda, item 12 is the consent agenda. And is there anything we need to pull for reflection on the consent agenda? We can discuss it. If not, then I'll need a motion to approve that.
Second that.
Motion by Mr. Wood, second by Ms. Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That's Ms. Ann Smith. All right, item 13, consideration and possible action regarding the recommendation of the interim superintendent as presented to non-renew the term contract of Ashley Barr pursuant to Chapter 21 of the Texas Education Code and board policies DFBB legal, DFF legal, and DFFB local.
That's correct. I'm Dr. Marcy Hambrick. I'm the Director of HR for Compliance, and I'm here to bring you 2 recommendations from the administration, each of which will need a separate motion. So the first is we are recommending that we terminate the Chapter 21 contract of Ashley Barr pursuant to DFFB local and legal at the end of the 2020-21 school year, and that's pursuant to those policies due to the reduction in force from the program change. So we are, based on our legal counsel's recommendation, we are asking that you state her name in the motion and that her name be included in the minutes.
Okay. You've heard the recommendation. Are there any questions? None. I'll need a motion, and please state the name.
I'll make the motion that as presented by administration that we non-renew the term contract of Ashley Barr.
Have a motion? Have a second?
Second.
Second by Ann Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Right, the second recommendation is that the board take action to terminate the non-Chapter 21 agreements for Daniel Buchholz and James Dillon during the contract period pursuant to board policies DCE local and legal. And similarly, it is due to a program change due to the reduction in force. And in this motion, we also recommend that you include Daniel Buchholz's name and James Dillon's name in the motion and in the minutes.
Okay. We have a recommendation. We'll need any questions, or we'll need the motion, and please state the name.
I motion to, based on the recommendations of the interim superintendent as presented, to terminate the non-Chapter 21 agreements of James Dillon and Daniel Buchholz pursuant to board policies DCE legal and DCE local.
Motion. Need a second? Jason James seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. And this is a report only, Dr. Womack, on school start times.
And transportation. And they go hand in hand. And I'm going to be very brief because I know we're getting late in time. And we definitely want to spend some time celebrating our new superintendent. So transportation and school start and end times go, as I said a moment ago, hand in hand with one another. When you look at our transportation system, we run a 2-tier system. Tier 1 is where we have our elementary schools and our intermediate schools together on the same route. So we actually transport our K through 6 students all together. And then Tier 2 is our middle school and high school where we transport our 7th through 12th grade students together. Back in 2013, for 5 years, that's when we opened Willow Springs Middle School. That's also the year that we transitioned to a 5-6 campus at Sloan Creek. At that time, we established a start and end times for our intermediate, elementary, middle, and high school to remain on the 2-tier system. So our intermediate school back then started at 7:45 and ended at 2:50. Whereas our elementary schools started at 8 a.m. and completed at 3:05, leaving a 15-minute gap in between the 2 schools to allow the transportation or buses to move from the intermediate to their individual elementaries, pick up the students, and then take them home, and then get back in time to the middle school for its release. So if you look at those together, that gave us 55 minutes in between the 2 tiers. that 55 minutes, obviously, when we release kids at 3:05, they're not actually on the bus at 3:05 and ready to go. So if you reduce that by about 10 minutes, that's about the average ride time that we would have for our students, about 45 minutes as a whole. And the reason I say that is because after we get them on the bus, get them situated, we've lost about 5 minutes. So we're leaving out of the campus around that 3:10 mark back at this time period. And then we're out on the trail, so to speak, on the route, and we need to get back to Willow Springs, which is about another 5 minutes that we lose of actual productivity. So then in 2018, we made an update, and this is when the state moved from the number of days that schools are required to be in session to the number of minutes the schools are required to provide for students. And so we took the opportunity back in 2018 to update our start and end times to allow for less actual school days, but meeting the state required number of minutes for each of our grade levels. And so the intermediate school changed from that 2:50 end time to 2:55. We actually increased it by 5 minutes, and the elementary school increased by 5 minutes from 3:05 to 3:10. And then at the middle school level, we actually started them 5 minutes earlier to give them their 5 extra minutes. So they went from a 8:45 start time to an 8:50 start time. So that gap between the two narrowed by about 5 minutes down to 50 minutes. Again, if you subtract out about 10 minutes, 5 minutes on the front end and 5 minutes on the back end, that gives you about 40 minutes for actual route time to deliver kids to their homes. And I keep referencing the afternoons because that's where the majority of our riders are, is getting kids from school to home, which is the vast majority, especially in that tier 1 area of our ridership. So in 2020, so this last school year, we adjusted the times once again by another 5 minutes. So we went from a 7:45 intermediate time to a 7:40. So we adjusted this front end of the start times to our intermediate, elementary, and middle school. So 7:40 to 7:55 at the elementary, and then 8:45 at Willow Springs to give them a total of 435 minutes per day. That allows us to meet our state requirement of 75,600 minutes in a school year. Believe it or not, we do meet those requirements. And so as we go through this next year, I think some of the unknowns, kind of like in the budget area, some of the unknowns that we might be dealing with is the increase of ridership, particularly because of the reconfiguration of our K-4 campuses. There could be a potential increase in the number of kids that are, or families that are choosing to utilize bus service to allow them, especially in our K-4 areas. And some parents may want to choose to use transportation so that they don't get involved in the campus traffic. So that's some of the unknowns. Some of the other unknowns is the traffic impact on route times as buses are trying to transition from the campuses out to the individual homes, making it through the red lights. How backed up are those going to be, and so forth, as well as the fee for all service. How will that impact ridership? Will we see a decrease or will it stay average? Hopefully the two offset somewhat on one another, and that we're actually providing services to those who need it and doing it daily and safely. And for 21-22, what we're recommending to the board, and there's no action tonight at all, but just recommending to the board, is that we continue to monitor the request for our bus services. We started on Friday releasing information out to our community to go ahead and go into Power School and sign up for services. And we've actually given them a few options on there. Not only are they saying, yes, I want bus service, but how the frequency of that bus service, whether it's every morning, every afternoon, both morning and afternoon, or shuttle service between campuses. And then we're also asking them, how would you like to take care of the fee? Do you want to pay monthly? Do you want to pay by semester? Do you want to pay annually as an option? And then we'll continue to monitor as we do. We provide the board every month our average numbers of riders per route. We'll continue to do that, as well as the estimated route times. How long are we spending per route? And so we provide that to you monthly in your board reports. And they're also available to the public through our board book. And so we'll continue to do that. And if necessary, we will come back to you probably in the spring after we have more data on those impactors that I talked about earlier, whether we increase ridership or decrease ridership based on the impacts. And if we need to make an adjustment, probably after spring break timeframe, we would want to convene a parent advisory committee on school start and end times, bring our community in, visit with them about the pros and cons of the various areas, from adolescent sleep to the traffic patterns around the district, and then try to develop some start and end times that make sense and are appropriate for getting kids to and from school through bus transportation. And with that, that's all I've got to share with you this evening. Questions? Thank you very much.
All right, next up is discussion, consideration and possible approval of the board calendar. Consideration and possible approval of changes to our board meetings, our BE local.
Board, you have asked me to focus on transparency and proactive communication, and this recommendation is in alignment with that. So I am bringing forward an administrative recommendation this evening for your consideration in regard to BE local. And this is kind of a means to an end because currently in our local board policy, we have that there will be regular meetings of the board on the third Monday of each month. And I will be recommending in the next item that we have a structure each month where we have a public board workshop and then also a regular meeting. And what that will allow for is administration to share information, for you all to publicly vet it, ask us questions, us provide information in that public forum so that our community is aware, and then they have the opportunity as well to dialogue with us and contact us between that workshop and that regular meeting. But if we're going to be able to do that, we cannot have our regular board meeting on the third Monday of each month any longer because there would not be enough room in the month. And so what I am recommending here is that we modify BE local to read that regular meetings of the board shall normally be held on the fourth Monday of each month rather than the third.
Thank
So
you.
move. Do I move for that?
So
Make a
moved.
motion?
So moved.
I make a motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, in conjunction with that, our next step would be consideration and possible approval of the board calendar for 21-22.
Yes, thank you. And so we have published a draft board calendar that has a board workshop, as I stated, and a regular board meeting each month. On an ideal month, you will see a situation of where there is at least a week between those, a full week where we don't have a meeting. And we're excited about this because we think it will lead to some more proactive communication and transparency. Do you have any questions for me?
So moved. I make a motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Can I just say real quick, thank you for that, because I know the community is asking for more information. So hopefully this will make you all feel more included. So great idea, and you're already just hitting the ground running. So
Thank you. I appreciate the support.
All right, next item is consideration and possible approval of a nomination of a trustee for the TASB Region 10 Position A seat of the TASB Board. Ms. Stacy Dillon.
The TASB Board of Directors are charged with carrying out directives by the delegates of the Delegate Assembly. And the director is expected to attend 4 board meetings per year. This item is if we would like to nominate one of our board members to serve in that position. This item is not an item to actually officially elect. This is to bring forth a candidate from our board to serve as a candidate for that election, if you are so inclined.
So Amy, can you share a little bit about the current candidate and
Sure.
a little bit?
Absolutely. So Debbie Gillespie is on the Frisco ISD School Board, and she is phenomenal. She represents Region 10, and each term is for 3 years. And so it's time to re-elect that position, and she has stated that she would like to serve in that position again. So I would advise that we support Debbie Gillespie. I think she's a phenomenal advocate for our Region 10. And I see no reason to nominate and run against her for any reason at this point. That's my recommendation.
Okay.
Sounds good to me, Amy.
Someday in life we might, but right now we think Debbie Gillespie is a great advocate for Region 10. So
You
we're
just wanna
behind her.
Give her a little resolution of support.
Yes,
So is that your recommendation?
that is my
All right.
recommendation.
So we'll just, her recommendation is maybe we just pass a resolution to support Debbie Gillespie in that role.
And I do get to see her very often, so I can relay back
Share that to her.
what she's doing and all the things.
I have a second for that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right. Item 19. Superintendent report. First one.
Yes, I'm excited to share that we have set up some opportunities in the next week for us to connect. I know that we've got a lot of our community that's out on vacation and certainly involved in all sorts of other activities supporting their children. But if you're in town and available, please check our website and social media because these dates and times will be listed. I think we've got 5 Community Connect events offered, one at each of our schools and at different times, some in the evening, some in the morning. Your kiddos do not have to attend that specific school to attend that one. We just did that so that I was visible around the district. But if you can, please stop by. I would love to get the opportunity to connect with you and meet with you. We will also have a Lovejoy Team Connect for staff on June 18th at 2 p.m. And then we'll do another one in July as well for staff. We have full intention to make sure that in the future we have additional community connects to increase that visibility and connection and dialogue with our community.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Ms. Cordell. All right. So announcements from myself. And, couple things. One, I wanted to give Coach Harima and the boys basketball team a shout out. I told you when I did this, I would not be perfect. And I'm certainly was reminded of that after my graduation speech with all humility. I left out the boys basketball team who won by district, and at the buzzer was beat by a 3-pointer to miss out on the area championship. So Coach Harima and his team did a great job this year. And I'm sorry I didn't mention that during the graduation speech, but wanted to present that. Second question I've been asked that I think is good to share with the community is about our curriculum. A lot of questions about that. We have a locally developed curriculum that's developed by our educators and our staff that reflects the values of the community, but 2, TEA recommendations which are incorporated, but that's driven by our graduate profile, which is a top-down approach to developing our curriculum. And that's something that we believe in strongly here, and that's not looking to change. It'll evolve and grow to become better and greater, and we'll do things to support it. But I just wanted to share that because there were some questions about that, and I thought it'd be good for you all to hear coming from us. We've talked about that, and we believe that's part of what's in that heart, and what makes this experience so unique is our students who come through this process, starting at the elementary level where that foundation is laid to build on. Nothing happens past that foundation. If we don't have a great foundation for these kids, we can't build upon that. And so it starts at that elementary level. It builds as we go through each stage of our educational process. And we bring those kids out the end to reflect what that graduate profile looks like. And our curriculum in whole is around that idea. So I just wanted to share that comment. Other than that, I am so excited to invite you all to hang out and visit with Miss Cordell. If you haven't had a chance to meet her, it's a great opportunity for you to visit with her. And if you don't get to have the discussions you want to have tonight, I encourage you to have them another time. You will be pleased and you will enjoy the discussions. I've gotten to know her over the past 21 days, like I said, and it's always exciting. When you get to know someone, you're excited, and as you get to know them and you work with them, you get more excited. That's the substance that you hope for when you make these decisions, and that's exactly what we have. So please hang out with us and visit with Miss Cordell. And as an enticement, there's cupcakes, I'm told. So, and with that, we'll be adjourned.